So we will read excerpt from Discovering the Inca Ice Maiden, My Adventures in Ampato. All right, and here we have our blurb at the top. In September 1995, Dr. Joanne Reinhardt and his climbing partner Miguel climbed a peak of a volcano in Nevada, Ampato. While climbing, they found pieces of pottery, wood, grass, and other materials that told them that over 500 years earlier, the Incas had been part of this mountain. All right, here's our next article. So we know it's in 1995, but technically this is an article, so it wouldn't exactly have a setting. It would have elements to it. We would just know it took place in September 1995. Here we go. I stopped to take notes while Miguel continued along the ridge. He whistled, and I looked up to see him with his ice axe raised. When I reached him, he pointed without saying a word. Even from 40 feet away, it was possible to see reddish feathers sticking out from the near top of the ridge. We had both seen feathers like this on Inca statues at other sites, so we knew instantly they would most likely be from a feathered headdress. Although the feathers were only about 10 feet down from the top, the slope was steep and slippery, a mix of gravel and sand over ice. A slip would not have meant certain death. Miguel weighed far less than I did, so I tied a long sling onto him and held him as he climbed down to uncover a statue made of a rare seashell with a reddish feathered headdress. Nearby, also covered with gravel, were two more statues, one gold and one silver. Their textiles were so well preserved they looked new. A textile is just anything that is like a garment or like curtain or fabric. The feathers that had been exposed were still in good condition. This meant that the gravel in which the statue had been buried had fallen away only days before. Indeed, the statues could have fallen farther down the slope at any moment. Back on the summit ridge, we saw stones that had formed a corner of a building. Most of the structure had fallen down one or two naturally formed gullies that had dropped 200 feet to the inside of the crater. From the ridge, we could not see where these led, so I wrapped two stones in yellow plastic that I carried in case we needed to mark our way. I threw a stone down each of the gullies, thinking it'll be a miracle if we ever see him again. We then climbed down off the ridge and scrambled our way around beneath it. We soon spotted yellow plastic before us where the rocky slope met the ice pinnacles where we had been climbing to the summit only a few hours before. A little farther, we saw what looked to us like a mummy bundle lying on the ice. It seemed so unlikely to find a mummy out in the open, we literally couldn't believe our eyes. Maybe it's a camper's backpack. Only half joking, I replied, maybe it's a climber. That wouldn't be a very funny joke. That would mean that somebody died on the mountain. Well, not 500 years ago, like recently. As we drew closer, I knew that the stripes on the cloth that it was probably a mummy bundle. This would mean only one thing. The Incas had performed a human sacrifice on the ridge top. The bundle containing the victim had been buried in the structure that had collapsed when part of the summit ridge crashed into the crater. So the reason they see it is because the gullies are like craters and holes, and then something must have collapsed and opened this up. I knew that even a partially frozen body was invaluable for science. A frozen body is like a time capsule, which allows scientists to look back into the past and find out things difficult to know otherwise, such as what foods were eaten, what diseases and bacteria existed, who was related to the mummy, where it came from, and much more. I grew more excited as I remembered that only 3 frozen mummies had been discovered in all of South America. Descending toward it, we found fragments of a torn textile, a seashell, 2 cloth bags containing food offerings, maize kernels, and a maize cob. Llama bones and pieces of Inca pottery were strewn about on the slope above the bundle. After I photographed these items, Miguel used his ice axe to cut loose the bundle from the ice. He turned it onto his side for a better grip. Both of us were momentarily stunned as the body turned. We looked straight into the face of a young girl. She was the first frozen female mummy found in South America. Her dried out features made me fear that we had arrived too late. However, the bundle weighed about 90 pounds, which meant the body was still frozen. A dried out mummy would have weighed much less. I wondered what to do next. If we left the mummy behind in the open, the sun and volcanic ash would cause further damage. Climbers might find her and take her other artifacts or souvenirs to sell. That's similar to the last story with Yuri, where people were like going to steal this stuff because it's valuable. Not only to science, but like to collectors who shouldn't really be doing it. They're being kind of selfish buying stuff like this for themselves. But, anyways, the ground was rock hard and it was impossible to bury the mummy. A heavy snowfall could cover the summit and make recovery impossible, meaning like they wouldn't be able to go get her again because they wouldn't find her or they wouldn't even be able to climb up there. Thoughts rushed to their mind. It could take weeks, if not months, to get a government permit that would allow me to return and recover the mummy. Obtaining the funding to organize scientific expedition could take even longer. I decided that we should try to carry the statues down the mountain. And that's where that one leaves off. So we don't know how this worked out for them. But he wasn't supposed to be doing this. So a difference in these stories is Yuri had local police help, and this guy's kind of doing things without anyone knowing. But he is, I guess you could say, he's on top of a mountain, and Yuri could really travel. He got on a helicopter and stuff. I don't know how Yuri had those resources, but this guy does not. And now we'll answer the questions for this story. Article. This was an article, meaning it's a true. So we would call this nonfiction. A nonfiction article means it really happened. And fiction is false. So fiction would be your story. This was an article, nonfiction.